Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video today, we're going to be once again discussing some more season previews. We're going to be going over to the Central Division today to talk about two teams in the Arizona Coyotes and the Colorado Avalanche. How they do in the offseason and how they look entering the 23-24 season. We'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Destined Hockey channel. Now, again, we're here with another season preview video. This time talking about the Colorado Avalanche and the Arizona Coyotes. So once again, we're going to start off by discussing how I did to finish out the 22-23 season, the additions and subtractions that the teams made this offseason, the top 3 picks that these teams had in the 2023 draft, my current projections for their lineup to start the 23-24 season, my current projections for how I think those teams are going to finish in the 2023-2024 standings, and on top of those, how I think their offseason did. I'll grade their offseasons as well. So, starting with the Arizona Coyotes here. Coyotes, don't need to talk about them too much, how they finished the 22-23 season. Finished with a record of 28, 40, and 14. 70 points, 7th in the Central, 13th in the West, where a bottom-dwelling team had the 6th lowest ranking in the NHL this year, finished 25 points back of the Winnipeg Jets for the final wildcard spot in the West. So they were nowhere close to being a playoff team. They were definitely not some team who I think was overly going to challenge for a playoff spot, so not too surprising there, in my opinion. And I don't think that's too much of a surprise. They're a rebuilding team. They're a team who was trying to do bad. They got into a really good position to have a really high draft selection, and they were able to do so. So I don't think there was overly surprise for the Coyotes doing bad last year, and I think they could definitely weren't being bad last year, but they definitely went into this offseason. They switched up their mentality. Over the past couple of years, they've been taking on bad contracts, not doing overly well, been saying that they're continuing to rebuild, gain draft capital. This year, they changed the narrative. They said they were not going to take on bad contracts this year, and they were looking to get a little bit more competitive. And I think they did quite well in that area. If you look at their offseason additions and losses right over here, they did fantastic, if in my opinion at least. Look at the losses. They lost Christian Fischer, who's a decent top 9 forward, to Detroit. They lost Brett Ritchie, Laurent Dauphin, who are both UFAs. They lost Bork Johnny Mama to UFA status as well. They lost him to Ottawa. And then they lost Connor Mackey, who was also UFA, to the New York Rangers. Not overly significant offseason losses this year. Fisher is a decent top 9 defenseman. Mackey was a good 6th, 7th defenseman. The other 3 were all depth additions on the forward group. They did not lose a whole bunch this offseason, but their additions were huge. They had Jason Zucker in free agency, who's a decent top 9 winger. They added John Leonard, who's a decent depth addition on the forward group. They added Alex Kerfoot, who's a decent top 9 winger. They added Nick Bukestad, who's a decent bomb 6 center/winger. They added Zach Sanford, who, just like Leonard, decent bomb 6 addition. So they had 5 really good forwards. They also had on the defensive end Travis Dermott, who's a really good defenseman, can play either side, can play third pair minutes. They had Stetcher, who can play second, third pair minutes for the Coyotes. They had Matt Dumba, who can be a decent top pair offensive defenseman for that team. And then they used their draft capital to acquire Sean Durzi via trade, who's another offensive defenseman who can fit into their top 4. So in my eyes, that's a fantastic offseason. You lose Connor Mackey, which is a bad blow, but you had Durzi, Dumba, Dermott, Stetcher. That defense looks like completely different and a whole bunch better. You lose guys like Ritchie and Fisher on the forward group. Really bad losses. But you had Zucker, you had Kerfoot, you had Leonard, you had Sanford, you had Bukestad. That forward group looks a ton better. And this isn't even including some of their younger guys who are going to get shots this year. We know Dylan Guenther had a little bit of a shot last year at the NHL level playing with the Arizona Coyotes. He's going to get a much bigger role this year, in my opinion. I think he could easily fit into top 9 this year. He didn't look out of place last year when he got his NHL stint last year. I think he's going to be a full-time NHLer this year. They also signed Logan Cooley, who is one of the top prospects in the NHL right now. Probably one of the favorites to get the Calder this year, along with a guy like Connor Bedard. He's going to be a fantastic addition on the offensive side as well, probably being a top 2 center on the Arizona Coyotes. So in my opinion, The Coyotes have a lethal forward group, have a pretty good defense, and they're still backstopped by two pretty good goaltenders in Kirill Vejmelka and Connor Ingram. So in my opinion, this Arizona Coyotes team, as much as I'm not sure if they're a playoff team, they're definitely a bunch better than last year. And even though I still don't think they're going to be a playoff team, we'll get to that in a second, they're going to be a scary team to face this year. So, in my opinion, they definitely did fantastic this offseason. On top of that, they had a lot of draft capital going into the 2023 draft. Their top 3 picks on the 2023 draft. First round, number 6 overall, they selected left shot defenseman Dmitry Simashev. Also in the first round, number 12th overall, they selected winger Daniel Boot with the 12th overall pick. And then on the second round, with the 6th overall pick in the second round, they selected goalie Michael Rabel. So they did not have the most draft picks in this draft class. They did not have the most first round picks in this draft class. They didn't even have the most second round picks in this draft class or the most picks in the top 2 rounds of this draft. But they definitely did have a lot of draft picks, and they did well, in my opinion, on most of them. I know Simashev and Boot were guys who were definitely criticized as being taken a lot too high, and I do think that's a little bit fair, but in my opinion, if they can work out, they come over from Russia, they do really good. I think Simashev and Boot could be fantastic top 4 defensemen and top 9 winger, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, the Coyotes did really well drafting, and they have a ton of draft capital going forward. I mean, this Coyotes team, if my memory serves me correct, has like 4 or 5 second-round picks in this upcoming season. They have a ton of draft capital. If this team, and this is a big if, but if this team were to be hovering around the playoff mark come trade deadline time, they would have a ton, and I mean a ton of assets they could work with if they wanted to improve that team even further. So they have a ton of draft picks. They could also try and move some of their pending UFAs at the deadline as well. So they could go either way, in my opinion. But they have a ton of draft picks. They used a lot last year. They did really good. I could see them use a lot this upcoming season, whether it be before the trade line or maybe even in season, to try and improve this team even further. But this team looks fantastic. My current projected lineup for the Arizona Coyotes for 23-24 season, as you can see here, has Clayton Keller playing on the top line with 2 youngsters in Logan Cooley and Dylan Guenther. In my opinion, I think there could be some other guys who go up there like Nick Schmalz, Barrett Hayton, Lawson Crouse, some other guys as well. But in my opinion, I think they put Cooley and Guenther with Keller on the top line. I have Matthias Maccelli playing with Hayton and Schmalz on line 2. I have Jason Zucker playing with Jack McBain and Lawson Crouse on line 3. I have Kerfoot playing with Bjugstad and Boyd on line 4. On the defensive end, I have Dursey and Dumba playing on line 1. I have Valimaki and Stetcher playing on line 2. And I have Moser and Soderstrom on line 3. And then I have Vejmelka as the starter, Ingram as the backup. I have Zhenik, who has yet to be signed at this point in time, as well as Michael Carcone and Travis Dermott be the 3 spares. I have Voracek, Little, and Weber all on the injury reserve, and that will have them really a ton of cap space still, and having them be cap compliant before the season starts. So Arizona Coyotes look fantastic. My current projected point total for this team, I'm taking a major step forward. I don't have them making the playoffs. I think that will be too huge of a step forward, but I do have them getting a huge bump in their point totals. I have them getting a 39, 34, and 9 record. So for those of you who don't know what that point total gets up to, that gets them up to 87 points for this upcoming season. I have them finishing 5th in the Central and 10th in the Western Conference. So I don't have them making the playoffs, but I have them being one of the better teams in the Central Division, and I do have them taking some big strides forward. I also have them finishing 17 more points than they did last year. So I have them taking a major step forward. I think it's possible that the Coyotes could wind up not being as productive as I have them projected to be right now, but I still think there's a really likely chance that the Coyotes do a lot better this year than last year and surprise a ton of people. And I think we'll be closer to a wildcard spot than a lot of people think. So in my opinion, I'm giving them an A- in their offseason ranking. They did fantastic. They drafted well. In my opinion, they can still have really good players in Putin and Simashev, even if they were taken a little bit high. Their offseason was fantastic. They did not lose a whole bunch of players, and they added some really big pieces, especially on the defensive end and on the top 9. They look a lot better than last year. And if the Cooley, Guenther can come in, do really well, work in the top 9 as well, this team is going to be really hard to play against this year. And I think even though Arizona hasn't been a really good team to play against over the past couple of years, I think they're going to be a team who's going to be extremely scary to face this year and should be able to surprise at least a couple of people and do really well this year. So in my opinion, Arizona, A- offseason grade. They did fantastic. Their offense looks better. Their defense looks better. They still have good goaltending. And I'd say they're going to have 87 points this year, just shy of a playoff spot. Going over to Colorado Avalanche, they last year finished with a record of 51-24-7 for 109 points. First in the Central, the third in the Western Conference. They hosted the Kraken in round 1. They would go up 1-0 and 2-1 in the series before losing games 4 and 5 to go down 3-2 in the series. They would win game 6 to force game 7, and then they would lose in game 7 to be down by the Seattle Kraken in the Kraken's first ever series win. So, really bad loss for the Avalanche to be ousted as the previous Stanley Cup champions. They were the Stanley Cup champions in 2022. So to be ousted in the first round the year after they won the Cup is not overly fantastic. But they were having a lot of injuries. They were a really banged up team. So there was definitely some reason as to why they were a team who was ousted in the first round. So definitely this offseason, they did not do half bad. They definitely did have their fair share of losses, but they also had their fair share of additions. So as you can see here in the loss category, they lost JT Compher to Detroit in free agency. They lost Lars Eller to Pittsburgh in free agency. They traded Alex Newhook to Montreal. They lost Evan Rodriguez to Florida in free agency. Darren Helm retired. They lost Matt Nieto to Pittsburgh. They lost Mikhail Maltsev to LA. They lost Alex Galchenyuk, who's currently a UFA right now. They lost Dennis Mulligan, who's currently a UFA right now. They lost Sampo Ranza, who's currently a UFA right now. On the defensive end, they lost Ryan Merkley, who signed overseas. And they lost Eric Johnson, who signed in Buffalo. So some pretty big losses for the Colorado Avalanche, in my opinion. But they also had some pretty big additions. They added Miles Wood from the Devils on a 6-year deal. They added Ryan Johansson in the trade from the Nashville Predators. They added Jonathan Drouin from the Montreal Canadiens in free agency. They added Ross Colton from the Tampa Bay Lightning in a trade. They added Frederick Olofsson, Riley Tuft, Chris Wagner, who are all decent depth forwards at the NHL level. They also added a couple of decent defensemen, Corey Schooneman, who's a decent depth defenseman, and Giovanni Fairbrother, who's a decent prospect from the Montreal Canadiens in that Alex Newhook trade. So in my opinion, not a fantastic offseason, but not a bad one nonetheless. Look at the team. The defense does not look that different. They lost Eric Johnson, which I think is a pretty bad loss. They also lose Ryan Merkley. They gain Giovanni Fairbrother, Corey Schooneman. It doesn't look that different than last year. I mean, the loss of Eric Johnson's pretty bad. But besides that, there's really nothing that changed on that defensive end. So, in my opinion, they still have a really good decor. They still have a pretty good goaltending tandem with Georgiev and Francouz. They did have some pretty good big changes up front. They lost in-season acquisitions Nieto and Eller to free agency. They lost Darren Helm, who's been a good bomb six forward. They lost Evan Rodriguez, Alex Newhook, JT Compher, who are all really good middle six forwards for that team. But they were able to add some players. I mean, they added Ryan Johansson. They are hoping to be the Kadri replacement as the second-line center. They add Miles Wood, who's a decent middle six forward. They add Jonathan Drouin, who's a former teammate in juniors of Nathan McKinnon, so hopefully they can play each other on the same line. They can rekindle that chemistry they had in juniors. They add Ross Colton, who's a decent middle six forward. He's shown that in Tampa. They add some decent depth in there as well with guys like Olofsson and Tuft and Wagner. In my opinion, they did fantastic. They didn't do overly bad, but they didn't have a really bad offseason either. They actually did quite well, in my opinion. They were able to get some draft capital with some of the trades. In my opinion, they improved on that forward group. They lose guys like Compher, Rodriguez, Newhook, as well as some depth additions, but they add guys like Wood and Johansson and Drouin and Colton, who I think could definitely fill in that top six. And even though they don't have Gabriel Landeskog, who's still injured right now, I think that offense did get better this year. And if they can have all those guys healthy and stay healthy this year instead of having a lot of those guys be injured, I think this team could definitely do really well in this upcoming season. So, in my opinion, they did fantastic this offseason, adding some players to help improve that team. You have the top 3 picks in the 2023 draft for the Colorado Avalanche team. They had the 27th overall pick in the first round. They used it to select center Callum Murchie. They had the 31st pick in the first round as their second selection. They selected left shot defenseman Mikhail Gulyayev. Then they didn't even have a pick until the 5th round when they selected 27th overall in the 5th round right shot defenseman Ishmilnikov. So they didn't have a whole abundance of picks, but they did have 2 first-rounders, and they made good on those 2 first-round picks. So, in my opinion, the Avalanche did really good drafting, and I think those 2 first-round picks were really good, and their later-round drafting as well is pretty good as well. As my current projected 2023-2024 roster for the Colorado Avalanche, in my opinion, to begin the season, I have Jonathan Drouin, being paired with Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen on the top line. Hopefully pairing with McKinnon, Duran can find his junior level game. On the second line, I have Arturi Lehkonen playing with Ryan Johansson and Valeri Nichushkin. On the third line, I have Ross Colton centering Miles Wood and youngster Oscar Ole-Olsen, who I think could definitely have a standing chance of making the NHL roster. And then I have Logan O'Connor playing with Ben Meyers and Andrew Cogliano on the fourth line. Defensively, I have once again Taze Makar, top pair, Byron Manson, second pair, Jack Johnson with Sam Girard, the third pair. That's a really, really good defensive group. They have Georgiev as their 1A, they have Francouz as their 1B. That's still a really good goaltending tandem. And then they have Tuft, Olofsson, and McDermott, all as their three spares to start the season. They have Linus Scoggin long-term injury reserve, and with all that, they will have a COD-compliant roster. So, in my opinion, they have a really good roster, and I think that defense, that goaltending, and even the forward group now does look a lot scarier to play against than it did last year. When they lost guys like Kadri and Burakovsky due to the fact that they were coming off the Stanley Cup victory, and they were not able to keep those guys around. So, the forward group looks a bit better. The defense and goaltending still looks solid. In my opinion, my current projection for this upcoming season, I have them finishing with a record of 51, 22, and 9 and for 111 points, second in the Central Division, third in the Western Conference, same as last year, and I have them finishing with 2 more points than they did last year. So 1 point lower in the Central Division, still third in the West, and 2 more points than they had last year. So in my opinion, I still have them doing really good. I still think with these improvements, they should definitely be a really good team. They shouldn't get off to as slow of a start as they did this upcoming season. And I think they should be able to get their legs out from under them really early in the season. But the defense still looks fantastic. They didn't really change anything in the offseason. The goaltending still looks fantastic. They didn't change anything in the offseason. The forward group, they definitely changed the forward group a little bit, and in my opinion, I think it looks better. So in my opinion, I'm going to give them a B. I think they didn't do much on the defensive end, they didn't do much on the goaltending, and when they did do a lot of changes on the forward group, I think improved them, in my opinion. So I'm giving them a B rating on their offseason. I think they had a pretty good offseason. So in my opinion, the Avalanche have a B rating in the offseason. The Arizona Coyotes have an A- rating in the offseason. Both teams did really, really well. The Avalanche improved their forward group, and their defense and goaltending looks really good. The Coyotes' goaltending still looks good, and their defensive offense looks really much improved. I still have the Coyotes missing the playoffs, though, slightly, but I have them taking a major step forward this year. I have the Avalanche still hanging around the top 2 in the Central Division, but I currently have them being second in the Central this year instead of first, and have them finishing with 111 points. So, definitely, I think both these teams are going to do really good this year. I still have Colorado being a top-end team, and I still have Arizona taking a major step forward. So definitely, that's all I'm going to talk about here today. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Does Colorado warrant a B off-season grade? Does Arizona warrant an A- off-season grade? Do you see the Avalanche being a top 2 team in the Central again next year? Do you see Arizona maybe taking some steps forward? Could they be a playoff team? I would definitely think the 8th spot in the Western Conference, in my opinion, wide open. So if Arizona can play well enough, maybe they can challenge for that spot. I think it's still maybe a year or 2 away from them challenging for a playoff spot. But in my opinion, I think they're going to definitely have the work cut out for them. But definitely, still, a fantastic offseason for the Arizona Coyotes, and I think they could definitely take some steps forward. Do you think the same as well? Are they going to take some steps forward, or do you think they'll still be a bomb-dwelling team in the NHL this year? Definitely. Love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really like it, remember to subscribe down below. I'll do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I have links down in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.